All right, so now we're going to talk about how to solve a polynomial inequality. So we need to first factor this to find our solutions. Then we can kind of sketch a graph, and that'll give us an idea of how we can write our solutions. Now when we do write our solutions, we want them in interval notation, so we'll go over that quickly. This graph, this is a positive x squared, so we're looking for a U-shaped graph. So we should know that by now. But I need to factor. So when I factor, I set up my two sets of parentheses. I have x times x gets me back to that x squared. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 24, but at the same time are going to add to a negative 2. So that gives me a negative 6 and a positive 4. That order doesn't matter. If you said positive 4 and negative 6, that's fine. But what we're saying is that negative 6 times 4 gets me to negative 24, and negative 6 plus 4 gets me to negative 2. So we know we did this right. This is being greater than or equal to 0, meaning that my solutions, if I were to write my solutions out, we know that x equals 6 here, and that x equals negative 4 here. So this is kind of what I'm looking at in my graph. I also want to make sure I focus, this is the important part, I focus that this is greater than or equal to 0. All right, so let's go ahead and graph. So we know that we're going to have this parabola. This is a U-shaped graph. It's going to cross our x-axis at negative 4 and positive 6. So here's our two solutions. Negative goes on the left, obviously. Positive goes on the right. Now, technically, we have this y-intercept of negative 24. So if I were to draw my y-axis, down here would be negative 24. Do you have to do that for these problems? No, but it's good to at least remember. What we are doing is this whole graph, this whole U-shaped graph, this parabola, we're trying to see when is this greater than or equal to, or when is this above the x-axis. Greater than means above or higher or up. Less than would mean below or under or down. And so where does this graph go above 0? Well, we have this part right here that's above 0, right? That's going up, and it's going up forever. This piece also is above the x-axis. It's greater than 0, going up forever. So what we need to do is we need to write these two pieces, but we need to write them in interval notation. And so how we do that is we look at this, and remember in interval notation it's always lowest, comma, highest. Well, the lowest x value that I get is all the way here to negative infinity. And when we do negative infinity, we use a parentheses. So we're going to say parentheses, negative infinity, comma, the highest. So this is negative infinity, it's coming down, it's coming down, it's coming down until it hits 0, and it can equal, so we have a closed circle or a bracket, it can equal negative 4. So because it can equal negative 4, we're going to use a bracket. Now because we have another piece, we need to use our union. And from union, remember, lowest, comma, highest. Well, in this case, we're starting at 6, and we're going off to positive infinity. And so we're going to use a bracket for when our value is 6. But because it goes to the right, our x value goes to the right forever, to positive infinity, we're going to do comma, infinity, and use a parenthesis. So we're saying that all of our solutions, everywhere that this graph is greater than or equal to 0 or above that x-axis, is going to occur on this kind of left side of the graph from negative infinity to negative 4. And it's going to occur, or it's going to occur over there to the right side of the graph from positive 6 off to positive infinity. Let's do one more. Here we have an x to the third, and so just kind of looking at this is a positive x to the third, so our graph should look something like that. So let's go ahead and factor as best we can to see where the solutions lie and get a good sketch of the graph. Now, notice how we all have a common factor. So they have a common factor of x. So if I factor out an x, I'm left with x squared plus 2x minus 3. And this is less than 0. So again, we're going to be looking at open circles. We're going to be using parentheses. We're seeing where this is under the x-axis. From here, this is factorable, so I'm going to set up my two sets of parentheses like I normally would, and I know that x times x gets me back to my x squared. So I need two numbers that multiply to a -3, but they're going to add to a +2. So I'm going to have a +3 and a -1. And again, order does not matter here. If you did -1, +3, that's fine. So 3 times -1 is -3, and then 3 plus a -1, or 3 minus 1, gets us back to +2. So here are our three factors. So we were looking for 3 because of our highest exponent. This one, we know that x is going to be equal to 0. We know it's going to cross at 0. Here, we know x is going to be equal to -3, and here we know that x is going to be equal to +1. So these are our roots, our zeros, meaning that when I graph this, I am going to have this graph that is going to go through our x-axis at -3 and at 0 and at 1. And so when I graph this, I have here at -3, here at 0, and here at +1. So if I drew my y-axis, I'll go right through the origin. Here's my first tick mark, and I know this isn't to scale, but there's my -3. I didn't do tick marks here. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to look and see, okay, where is this graph underneath the x-axis? Where is it below the x-axis? Because it's less than. Where is this going down? Where are my y values going down? Oh, okay, so under this x-axis. So we have this piece here where it's below the x-axis. And we also have this piece here where it's below the x-axis, in between the coordinate points of 0, 0, and 1, 0. So again, we're going to have two separate pieces we need to write, so we're going to use interval notation and have our union, combining those two pieces together. Remember, it's always lowest comma highest. So this is going to -infinity, and so we're going to use a parentheses and say from -infinity all the way up until I get to -3. Now notice that this is not less than or equal to, it's less than. So it cannot equal -3, but it can get right up next to it. And so we're going to use a parenthesis, meaning it can be -3.00001, but it cannot be equal to -3. And then so as I move along my graph, I see, oh, hey, here it is, again, below the x-axis. And that occurs between 0 and 1. So because that occurs between 0 and 1, we're going to say union. And then this is going to be lowest, comma, highest. So between 0 and 1, our y value is going to be below the x-axis. It's going to be negative or less than 0. And 0 is going to have an open circle or a parenthesis because we are not equal to. And the same thing with 1, because we are not equal to 1, we have to use a parenthesis for that. So brackets are used when it can equal that value, so when we have the equal to symbol, and parentheses are used always for positive and negative infinity, as well as when it is not equal to 0.